Hi, I'm Avery,
I am Lily.
and welcome to our February free movie of the month uh, of the From the Closet podcast. And that was supposed to be February 2022. I didn't say 2022, but it's February 2022. Today we are covering All Quiet on the Western Front, the 1979 version, which is free on YouTube Movies. And I will be posting a link in the description on YouTube where you can go to purchase the movie.
I think,
This movie is based on a
yeah.
book. It's a book to movie adaptation. I have no idea how to pronounce the author's name, so I'm not even going to try. But it's pretty popular. It should be like the only result when you search it up. So, yeah. And to be honest, I don't even know how to begin covering this movie.
Yeah, I think this is actually the longest movie we've covered.
Maybe.
Definitely
That
felt like
seems.
that way.
It definitely seems like it. It is over 2 hours long.
2 hours, 30 minutes.
Yeah. And I mean, that rivals even some Marvel movies. Um,
I think the only way we're able to, get past that is we start covering the Titanic.
eh, we're going to cover that movie eventually as well. But this is our first historical fiction movie in the podcast, and it's covering a group of a class of German people who went into the military during World War One, and it mostly focuses on Paul. I want to say his last name was Barner or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, it mostly focuses on him and his experiences. So there are some things I do want to talk about with this movie because the things this movie does well, it really, really does well. Um, it perfectly captures, um, it perfectly captures the feeling of being lost in time. Like
hmm.
it's very difficult to judge how much time is passing during the movie, and from what I understand, that is also something that uh, you would experience in a war, uh, because it's the same thing. Uh, it's the same thing over and over again, and it feels like it when you're actually out there in the field. It feels like nothing is changing. At least this is just from what I've heard.
Hmm.
And I don't know if this was an intentional thing done by the movie or if it's in the book at all, or if it's completely unintended to be that way. But it also like captures fear. It captures how crazily fast someone close to you can be lost. Um, in particular, there's a scene near the end where there's this older character named Kat. I'm not sure what that's short for. Um, they were like he gets shot in the leg, and then our main character Paul is carrying him to an infirmary hospital sort of thing, and dies before he even makes it. And Paul was like, "We were just talking 10 minutes ago," and yeah,
Yeah, this film can perfectly picture fear, sadness, grief.
yeah. And then like some other things it does well is like humanizing um, what we would consider to be the other side of the war, because again, this movie is focusing on Germany and German soldiers, and we briefly, talk about each of them. We learn their names, we learn their goals, what they want to do, um, when the war is over, if they manage to survive. And every one of them is different. They're all different people. And the movie really does capture how an instant can just change everything. It really captures how much war can change a person, because Paul is a very different person at the end of the movie than he is at the beginning. But there are
Yeah.
some things I very much don't like about this movie. Um, for one thing, there's a lot of mid movie narration, which is something that I hate. I really hate mid movie narration. There's one scene where I felt like, you know, it was really appropriate, and I'm okay with them doing, I'm okay with any movie doing it. And it's like when Paul was writing the letter, he was narrating the words that he was writing, because we couldn't see the letter, and then of course he rips it to pieces. Um, but yeah, mid movie narration is not a great thing in my opinion.
I don't know. God, this movie did just leave me with a lot of unanswered questions. A lot of, well, no, now what?
Yeah, I mean, another thing this movie does too is it captures the idea of the fact that, you know the people out there fighting on the front lines, they they don't know what they're fighting for most of the time. Um, and particularly, Kat points this out at one point. He's like, we're not how, one side is like, oh, we're protecting our land, and the other side is like, oh, we're protecting our land. But in the end, none of that's really what's going on. It's just some people have something to gain, and it's some people very high up, disconnected from all of their lives. And it really showcases why war is so terrible.
Terrible, terrifying.
Yeah. And World War One, which is what this movie focuses on, I don't
Hmm.
know if I said it, was one of the most brutal wars ever. I Before doing this podcast, I went and watched Oversimplified's 2-part series on World War One, just to kind of get a refresher on the stuff that happened. So basically, this is focusing on purely the conflict between uh, Germany and France. Um, and we never really see the British. We never really see the Americans, and of course, we don't see the Russians, because they're on the Eastern Front. Um,
Um, I do remember the Americans were referenced.
yeah, they were referenced twice. Once early in the movie, someone said the Americans would never get involved, and then later, Kat says that the Americans are starting to show up now. And
Yeah, a
then,
lot of people did not think the Americans would get involved.
yeah, and then also several times throughout the movie, we see and are told that the new recruits coming in are getting younger and younger and younger, and that implies so much. One, they're running out of men in the country within a certain age range. Two, they're conscripting, which is a horrible practice. Horrible, absolutely terrible. And it's I it is kind of gut wrenching to watch. And then like, so you really get to feel for. I would say you don't really get to feel for a lot of the characters except for Paul, um, Albert, and Kat.
I think Cat was my favorite character throughout this movie.
Yeah, I would say the same. I feel like he had the most. It's kind of weird to say. Like, I feel like he had the most character out of any character. It's like there was more to him than there was to everybody else. It felt
Hmm.
like that's just how it felt to me. Um, and it's yeah. There's one other character I do want to mention, and
Hmm.
it's that one general who. There's this one general who,
Oh, I remember this
when
one.
we first, yeah, when we first see him, he's just being an absolute dick for no reason. Um, and then a bunch a bunch of guys, like I think it's all our class that we've been following, or maybe there's some other people in it too. It's kind of hard to follow, but they all like kind of get revenge, especially because he's been picking on this one kid a lot. Like at one point, he even has the kid running up and down stairs, waiting when he gets up a flight. The general would then come up, step on his foot, and he'd have to run up the stairs again, and then wait for the general to come up and step on his foot again. Like, and this is all because he sneezed when the general was looking at him.
I think this one was because, well, all the picking was because he sneezed. But when he did something he didn't like, and then immediately get told off by one of the higher ups.
Yeah, see, that was another thing too. Like he gets told off, um, and then eventually he gets punished by getting sent out to be the supervising officer to the group that we've been following. This group of soldiers in uh, in the trenches, which I believe they were called like the second division or second something.
Hmm.
Because there was this whole scene
Yeah,
earlier
you're
where
right.
they were talking to the cook, and it was like, "Oh, you cooked for the second whatever the word was. I can't remember."
Yeah, let's just say second division.
Yeah, let's just say that because I can't remember the word that was used. I watched half this movie yesterday and the other half today,
Then
and
yeah, like long movie.
that particular scene was at the very beginning of the movie. And we also have this teacher character very early on who our protagonist Paul comes in, and nothing he says is outright antagonistic towards him, but you can just feel the hate for everything that this war has put him through whenever he talks to the teacher.
Oh yeah, you can the tension you can poke through it.
Yeah, like you. I commonly hear the expression, the tension, you could cut it with a knife.
I was gonna say
You
that,
could
but
prob you could probably cut this tension with an unsharpened pencil.
interesting. This is relevant. So apparently, All Quiet on the Western Front is planning on getting another movie.
Another adaptation?
Yeah, on Netflix.
Hmm.
This year.
Maybe we'll cover that. Probably not this year. We'll see. I'd like to have read the book
Mhm.
before we cover another adaptation of this movie. because I think one of the other big problems I have with this movie is that it feels like the story would have worked better in a book. And I'm kind of in a weird spot now where I'm trying to judge this movie having not read the book. And I don't know, I guess part of me feels like my criticisms and my praises, like both sides of it, part of me feels like they can't really be genuine since I haven't read the book.
Though, I mean, we're also reviewing this movie based on the movie.
Yeah.
And this movie is not just based on the book, it's also, this is the second adaptation that existed.
Oh, there was an earlier one?
Yes. That one is the 1930s.
Ooh. Yeah, I don't know if we'll cover that one.
I want to say it's a silent film, but I'm not actually sure.
I wouldn't be surprised. And
Definitely
then I
black and
think this
white.
and then I think this movie also, like this version in particular, also got an HD remaster.
Whatever happens, I'll be at least interested to see what Netflix puts out.
Yeah. I'd like to read the book at some point, but chances are I probably won't. But yeah, this movie it's gut wrenching. So like we have things that feel like they happened weeks ago get brought back up later, and then you come to realize that could have happened days ago, and I just can't tell how much time has passed.
Well, that's a great merit for the movie. It also makes it a bit hard to cover
Yeah.
because
Like,
we don't, um, we don't know how much time has passed. It's hard to, give you guys a good representation of a timeline.
yeah, and again, like that's something that I don't know if the movie was intentionally going for, or if that's or if it's that way in the book too. And obviously, like neither one of us are military, neither one of us have ever been in a war, and I hope neither one of us ever go to a war. Because
One of my teachers is a veteran. Oh,
yeah,
actually, now thinking about it, not dead, but not in a state where I can ask him questions now. But my grandpa served in the Vietnam War.
oh yeah, and that war was pretty brutal as well.
I remember he was a spy.
Yeah, and so another thing too with this movie is like I really appreciate how it showed that sometimes you lie to people to protect them from the truth, and like it's gut wrenching to watch because like there's a scene where Paul is talking to the mother of one of his friends, and he's telling her that this friend did not suffer when we know he did. We watched him suffer. Um, and it's really painful to watch. Like this movie does a good job at making you feel, um, but not necessarily so much for the individual soldiers themselves in the moment. It's like most of the feelings come later in the movie, and I feel like I guess the first half of the movie is really hard to get attached to anyone.
Hmm. I wonder if, and obviously, like Avery said, we have not in the military and hopefully never will. But I think that's can almost be on purpose. You know, throughout your serving, you would become closer bonds. and when the bonds go away, well, that just makes it even sadder.
Yeah, so like that almost could be a praise to this movie. So like it, it is really difficult to try to judge this movie on almost anything because like it's talking about things that we haven't experienced. um it's based on a book that we haven't read about events from 100 years ago. Like it is so difficult here, but
Well, I'm not
I think
regretting watching the movie because it was a good movie. We should have done the Body Snatchers because
yeah,
I
we had
didn't.
an we had so going into this we had a decision to make between Invasion of the Body Snatchers and this movie, and we chose this movie. If it's still free, we're probably going to do Invasion of the Body Snatchers next month. um just
I would not
so
even think about how hard it would be to cover this movie.
yeah, it's and like there are other movies too where the plot is more streamlined that we'll be able to cover that are also considered war movies, because we will cover more in
Mm-hmm.
the future. Not a lot more, because historical fiction usually isn't my thing. Um,
Why? Out of curiosity, why did you have this as one of the options?
because I saw it was free and I'd heard of it.
Fair enough.
And I mean, that's really what the free movie of the month series is about, is finding movies that are free that we wouldn't normally watch and covering them.
I have definitely heard this movie praised more than a few times.
I've heard the book praised.
Or may I actually heard the book praised. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Like I learned about the book's existence in history class, so it was, certainly on my radar. And I of course had, some understanding of like the actual history, because
Mhm.
like while historical fiction isn't really my thing, I am very fascinated with like actual history. And the whole thing with World War One, it like how World War One happened was so complicated, and then World War Two probably wouldn't have happened, um, if not for the way that we treated Germany after World War One. I mean, we probably still would have had to deal with Japan, maybe Italy too.
Though, I want to say that maybe Italy would have been a bit easier to deal with without being helped by Nazi Germany.
Yeah, I mean, even with their help, I don't like just trying to remember what Italy did in World War Two. I can't remember them doing much of anything other than occupying Albania and taking over some African countries
Yeah, I can't
and
remember
losing a
much
bunch of
either.
battles elsewhere and being invaded
Yeah,
near the
World
end of
War
the war.
Two, very consistent. It consists of Nazi Germany, Japan. Oh, and Italy was there too.
Yeah, and then like of course this movie is focusing on World War One though, and World War One consisted of the Central Powers, which was it was Austria-Hungary, Germany, and the Ottoman Empire.
Oh, I just remembered something. So, speaking about wars, and what's happening in today, did you know that China and Russia are in an alliance now?
No surprise.
Anyway,
Anyway, with regard to this movie, I definitely think like it's a really good movie, but out of all the war movies that I have seen, it's probably my least favorite. And I've seen people call this movie a masterpiece. I don't know. I don't really feel that. Matter of fact, the top comment on the YouTube movies thing, because you can actually comment on movies on YouTube,
God, I
the top comment calls it a masterpiece.
usually I
And
look at those comments, but for this movie I didn't.
yeah,
I'm sad.
and maybe the book is a masterpiece. Who knows? I haven't read it. But I mean, I just didn't really connect with this movie the way I connected with some other war movies. In particular, there's one movie called The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, which focuses on more on World War II.
Hmm.
God, that movie really got me, and I love that movie. And we're gonna cover it eventually on the podcast. When I don't know, but we will.
I don't know, I think a lot of this movie, and a lot of it was uncomfortable, and a lot of it, sad, heart wrenching, and a lot of honestly, when Kat died, I I don't know how to feel. Feel
Yeah,
emotions are just gone.
it was like Cat gets shot in the leg, and immediately I was like, dang, I actually liked that guy. And like you just knew that he wasn't gonna live to the end of the movie, but they kind of kept you going and keeping that little thread of hope alive as, Paul was carrying him to the hospital, but it just wasn't meant to be. And then like I was kind of thinking as Paul was writing this letter to the only other person in his class that remained alive and healthy,
Hmm.
I was literally thinking to myself, oh, he's gonna die at the end. And
I was like, and I was keeping attention at the time. I was like, this feels like it's gonna end on something, but like, you don't have that much time remaining. Come on, just make it through.
yeah, our protagonist, Paul Barner, I think, I'm probably saying his last name wrong. I could be misremembering it altogether, but like, he dies. Pretty sure it's a bullet wound to the head. They don't actually show it because this movie is PG-13.
They
Um,
already shown enough blood.
yeah, like there's this one scene earlier in the movie where Paul stabs a French soldier multiple times, and uh, then just kind of has to lay hidden next to the French soldier who is like slowly bleeding out. And I'm kind of surprised he's not dead by the time daybreak comes. But like daybreak comes, and Paul just can't take it anymore, and like tries to alleviate some of the soldiers' suffering before he ends up passing.
Yeah, the
And I
most
feel,
unrealistic part about this movie is how long that soldier was
yeah,
living.
yeah, that's probably the only unrealistic part about this movie, to be honest. But like, it's in this moment where like it's also in this like scene where it helps, further establish how terrible war is. And that's really what this movie is trying to do. Where he talks about how like, he being a German soldier and the guy he's killed being a French soldier, um, how they're not really that different. And it's not a cliche where, the villain tells the hero, "Oh, we're not so different." It's it's a human moment,
Hmm.
and it's very well written. I would kind of love to see how that was written in the book. Um,
Yeah, and almost just everything that Kat said. Um, you mentioned this before, but how they're just fighting for a couple people interests.
yeah, they're fighting for a couple of people's interests, and it's terrible. And they're being told that they are, good for doing it.
Um. Oh, and when Paul came back, and I think I really want to emphasize on how when Paul came back to his regular life, just no one knew, what was out there. His dad
Yeah,
was talking about, this war like a chess game, because that's
yeah.
all they know.
Which, when you talk about the war like a chess game, who are the pawns?
More human lives.
Yeah. Because, I mean, you really think about it, you're playing a game of chess. You don't really think about the pawns too much. The pawns are just, you'll sacrifice a pawn real quick, but, at the same time, the pawn can make it to the end and become whatever you want it to be. And that's kind of like a
The
random
Queen
soldier
of
doing.
England.
I mean, it's like I wouldn't compare. I really wouldn't try to compare war to chess.
Though, in a way, that's how, people treat war, especially, higher up people. They treat it like
Yeah,
chess. A few disposable soldiers here to get the upper hand.
yeah. It's like the people in power don't really think too much about the human lives that they are just throwing away. And then, like, the other thing too is like they're not thinking about how the people are starving, because that was another aspect of it too. Is like throughout the movie, there's talks about, sometimes they have to go hungry, and sometimes there's just not enough food to feed all of them, and it's because there's a blockade and they can't import food. But they don't really, specifically say that, but that's why they were being blockaded. And
Um,
it's like, the people in power don't really think about this kind of stuff.
because they treat it like a game, something
Yeah.
to win.
And it's not just, the people in power in Germany, it's always the people in power on every side of the war.
And I know this is a completely different war, but something I do know about, like, the most war I do know is the war in Vietnam. Um, Especially how the soldiers were treated after the war.
Yes,
Because
mm, that
um,
was that was really terrible.
these people who are sacrificing their lives for the higher ups' interests are getting trashed at by the public because they can't open their eyes for 1 second to find out who's really at fault.
Yeah, and then like on top of that, a lot of them were conscripted. People forget that the United States had conscription and technically still has it even though they don't use it.
Um, I want to say like what that is, but that's where if one country goes to war, you have to go with them, right?
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
And like conscription is like randomly selecting people. Uh and like we do have that. It's called the selective service.
Okay, that's not what I
And
was thinking, but Though, don't most people call like something like the draft or whatever
Yeah, and there's been big movements to
to eliminate it, right?
to eliminate it, and I support those fully. I don't think anybody should ever have to go and fight for something they don't believe in, especially like this is America. We have the biggest military in the world. We don't need a draft.
Very true.
But yeah, it's
We've.
like
Sorry, I'll let you
this
finish
movie
this.
is like we do need to be talking about this movie. Um
Okay. What I was gonna say is, we've veered off long enough from the movie, and I mean, unless if you have something else you want to say about the movie, then I'm all ears.
I do want to say is like, well, there is a lot of sadness and like death and grief in this movie. It never really got me to the point of tears, and
Honestly, I never really cry during like a movie. There's selective things that I cry. A lot of times, movies are not one of them, so
I mean,
I wouldn't know.
I have cried during several movies, but this one really didn't get me. The Boy in the Striped Pajamas, that one really got me. And then like, if there are quite a few others, I won't get into them here because that would be a whole tangent in and of itself. But the movie does do a good job of actually making you feel things for um, at least a few of the characters in the second half.
Hmm.
And
Long movie.
it also does a good job of making you hate certain characters as well.
Yeah, that general really did deserve it.
Yeah, and like I will say something that was disappointing is like, oh yeah, he died in the movie, but it was only like mentioned. We didn't actually see his death.
Actually, that could also be like another praise for the movie, as you just because I do remember because when Paul was going off to back to the war, you know, there's a lot of times you only just come, talk about someone only to know about the recent passing.
Yeah, and like there's also this scene when Paul goes home and like his father wants him to wear his
Uniform.
uniform so he can show him off. And it's like, oh my god, these people are so detached from what's happening. And this is like reality. It's not
Hmm.
unrealistic.
And it's weird because I don't actually know if I can blame them.
Yeah, it's like you can't hate them for it.
Because, like them, they also can't control the war. They can't control what they know about the war, and they'll never know unless they serve.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you can't hate them for the way that they think. Um because they just don't know any better and you can't expect them to know any better. But at the same time, you feel what Paul is feeling in that moment.
Definitely.
Yeah,
You definitely see all sides to things in this movie.
yeah, it's so another thing I will say about this movie is probably my last big point is that
Okay.
I found myself a bit annoyed at the length of some of the sections where it was just like um I don't want to call them action segments because it feels like it's belittling them. But the sections where both sides are shooting at each other and throwing explosives and stuff. Like,
Hmm.
I feel like those sections could have been shortened a bit and still gotten the point across.
Yeah.
You still need to have many of them because you really, like, in a movie like this, you need to drive home the repetitiveness of it. You need to drive home how, like, you need to drive home the idea of feeling lost in time, like it never ends. And I do appreciate that they did showcase that, sometimes they'd be throwing explosives towards the enemy for days at a time, only to just attack them when they're tired, because they haven't slept in days because explosions keep going off. And they showcased shell shock kind of like once briefly. But yeah, this type of stuff really did cause shell shock for a lot of people. And I guess that's my last big point that I would have to make.
I guess just like a final closer. I don't know. This film is just the embodiment of my emotion right now, which is confusion. Like I can't. I guess after watching this, it just feels weird. Um, because it makes you feel for every side, but never has a clear answer of, you know, who is right or what to do about it. And
Yeah,
at
and
the
like
very end, it just ends with a bang.
yeah, and it like to its credit, like that's the point. Like the whole thing about this movie is that war is wrong, and like this story, is just going through someone who manages to still have compassion in the midst of a war, but even still, it has changed him a lot. So yeah, I do enjoy this movie. I probably won't watch it too many more times if I watch it again at all.
And I guess now it's
So
for usual podcasting for rating the movie. Oh, you go first.
I have a hard time deciding how I want to rate this movie, because I did try to premeditate on it, and I keep going like back and forth. It's like I keep going between 6 and like 9.5, and I can't decide where it goes. Um,
Honestly, that's honestly my feeling as well. This
yeah,
movie is
so
just has so many moving parts to it that it's really hard to pinpoint anything.
yeah, exactly. And it doesn't exactly have a streamlined plot either. Um, so
No.
it's kind of hard to judge the movie when your usual standard that you're judging movies on is how like the plot flows. I think I'm probably going to give this movie a 7.5 because that just feels like a good middle ground
Yeah,
where hopefully I won't piss people off, but it also feels like the movie deserves that level of praise.
mhm. I'll follow suit with that. Um, I wouldn't. I feel like tomorrow I'm gonna find an assassin at my door, but um, I don't feel like this was a masterpiece per se. But I
The book very
definitely
well may be.
maybe. But this movie, I feel like in all honesty, it did what it wanted to do, and it shown an accurate depiction of war, and just it did everything that it wanted to. I'll say that.
Yeah. So the question is what you're rating it.
Um, like I said, the same as you.
So
Yeah, 7.5.
we're both giving it a 7.5. All
Definitely.
right. So I think that's pretty much it. So like I said, there will be a link in the description if you are listening to this on YouTube, for you to purchase this movie. But like, it's also free on YouTube Movies currently. Um, at least if you live in the U.S. I know a friend, like I was talking to a friend of mine about it earlier, who lives in Canada, and he said it's not available to him for free.
Did he look on YouTube or did he just Google it?
No, he looked on YouTube.
Okay, because I actually Googled it, and the first thing that showed up was the 1930 version, and that one wasn't free. But the 19, um, actually,
79.
yes, thank you, 79 version was free.
Yeah. So yeah, I think with that, we will see you for our next free movie of the month for March, which will hopefully be Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Um,
Um,
Speaking about that, I may be wrong, but the next podcast would be the Incredible Hulk, right?
maybe.
I can't think of what else because the last podcast we did, or at least that was uploaded, was
Gravity Falls,
movie was The Lightning Thief.
probably. I can't remember. That was 2 weeks ago.
Well, I know that for a fact.
So yeah. Um, until next time, I've been Avery. That's been Lily, and we'll see you.
I